I flew in for my son's wedding, paid my own ticket, brought the heirloom veil, the gifts, everything. My name is Minnie Thompson. I'm 62 years old, and my only son, Lucas, just got married last month. I was so excited to see him after nearly a year apart. I spent weeks preparing, bringing our family's precious heirloom veil, passed down for 4 generations. The cross-country flight cost a fortune, and I carefully selected meaningful gifts for the newlyweds. But what happened at that airport changed everything. Before I tell you what happened at that airport, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever gone above and beyond for a family event that didn't go as planned. I've always been close with my son Lucas. When my husband Frank died of a sudden heart attack, Lucas was only 8 years old. I remember sitting him down on our worn living room couch, trying to explain through my tears that Daddy wasn't coming home. Lucas just stared at me with those big brown eyes, so much like his father's, and asked, "Are you going to leave too, Mommy?" I promised him right then that I would always be there for him no matter what. Being a single parent wasn't what I had planned for my life. Frank and I had dreams of having 3 or 4 children, but complications after Lucas was born made that impossible. So Lucas became my entire world. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat: administrative assistant during weekdays and waitressing weekend evenings when my neighbor could watch Lucas. Those years were exhausting, but I never wanted Lucas to feel the absence of his father translated to a lack in any other area of his life. We developed special traditions that were just ours. Every Sunday morning, we made pancakes together. I'd let Lucas mix the batter even when he was small, and more of it ended up on the counter than in the bowl. As he got older, he became quite the pancake artist, creating Mickey Mouse shapes and even attempting to spell out words with the batter. Even through his teenage years, when many kids pull away from their parents, Lucas would still shuffle into the kitchen on Sunday mornings, bedhead and all, to make pancakes with me. Every summer, we went camping for a week at Lake Moraine. It wasn't fancy, just a small tent and a cooler of food. But those nights under the stars, telling stories and roasting marshmallows, are some of my most precious memories. Lucas learned to fish there, caught his first bass when he was 11, and couldn't stop talking about it for months afterward. When Lucas graduated high school, I couldn't have been prouder. He was the first in our family to go to college, earning a partial scholarship to State University. I took on extra shifts to help with his expenses. Those college years were tough financially, but I never let Lucas know just how tight things were. Sometimes I'd eat ramen noodles for days so I could send him a care package or money for books. He'd call me every Sunday night during those college years. I'd wait by the phone, so excited to hear his voice, and all about his classes, his friends, his dreams. He was studying computer science and was brilliant at it. I didn't understand half of what he talked about, but I loved listening to his passion. After graduation, Lucas got a job offer from a tech company in Seattle. It was across the country from our small town in Pennsylvania, but I encouraged him to take it. "This is your chance," I told him, even as my heart broke at the thought of him being so far away. "You have to grab these opportunities when they come." The day I dropped him at the airport, I cried the entire drive home, but I was so proud. My boy was making something of himself. The first year, Lucas came home for every major holiday. We'd talk on the phone at least once a week, sometimes more. But over the past 2 years, something changed. The calls became less frequent sometimes, just quick conversations where he seemed distracted. He missed Thanksgiving the year before last, saying he needed to work. Then Christmas last year, claiming airfare was too expensive during the holidays. I offered to pay for his ticket, but he said he couldn't take the time off. Then I got a call that changed everything. Lucas's voice was excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, I met someone. Her name is Allison. She's amazing and, well, I think she might be the one." I met Allison twice before they got engaged. The first time was on a video call that lasted maybe 15 minutes. She was pretty with perfect blonde hair and a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The second time was when they came to visit for a quick weekend. Allison spent most of the time on her phone, and when she did speak, she made little comments about our town being quaint and simple, in a way that felt more like criticism than compliment. But Lucas looked at her like she hung the moon. Who was I to question his choice? I just wanted him to be happy. The engagement announcement came via text message. A quick, "Allison and I are engaged," followed by a photo of a ring that looked more expensive than my car. I called immediately, of course, but the conversation was brief. Lucas was at work and couldn't talk long. I sent Allison a congratulatory message too, but only got a thumbs-up emoji in response. The wedding invitation arrived 3 months before the date. 3 months' notice for a cross-country trip seemed short to me, but I would have moved mountains to be at my son's wedding. The invitation was elaborate, thick cardstock with gold foil lettering. A smaller card inside mentioned the wedding would be at Allison's parents' waterfront home in Seattle, followed by a reception at an exclusive yacht club. The phone calls became even less frequent after the engagement. When we did talk, Lucas mostly spoke about Allison's wedding plans and her family's connections. Her father was some big shot in the tech industry too, apparently. I tried asking about how Lucas was feeling, if he was nervous or excited, but he always redirected the conversation back to venue details or catering choices. "You'll love Allison's parents," Lucas assured me during our last call before the wedding. "They're so sophisticated and well-connected. Her dad might even be able to help you find a better job if you wanted to relocate." I didn't have the heart to tell him I had no desire to leave my home or the job I'd had for 15 years. Besides, at 62, who would hire me? "I can't wait to see you," I told him instead. "I've missed you so much." "Yeah, it's been a while," he replied, sounding distracted. "Listen, Mom, I gotta go. Allison and I are meeting with the caterer. Talk soon, okay?" The call ended before I could even say goodbye. Something felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was my only son's wedding. It was going to be perfect. The minute I received Lucas's wedding invitation, I started planning. The first challenge was the plane ticket. Seattle is exactly 834 miles from my small Pennsylvania town. I looked it up. The cheapest flight I could find was still $850 round trip, which was a significant chunk of my monthly retirement income. But there was never a question of whether I'd go. This was my only child's wedding. I'd have walked there if necessary. I withdrew $100 to $200 from my emergency fund to cover the flight and started setting aside money from each pension check for other expenses. The wedding was at an upscale venue on the water, which meant I needed appropriate attire. My everyday clothes, practical slacks and comfortable sweaters, wouldn't cut it for such an elegant affair. My friend Susan went shopping with me for a dress. "You need something that makes you look like the proud mother of the groom," she said as we browsed department store racks. "Something dignified but not matronly." We finally found it, a knee-length deep blue dress with a subtle shimmer to the fabric. The saleswoman assured me it was perfect for a waterfront wedding. At $175, it cost more than I'd spent on clothing for myself in the past year combined, but the look on Susan's face when I tried it on told me it was worth it. "Lucas won't be able to help noticing how beautiful his mother looks," she said, squeezing my hand. Then came shoes, a small purse, and costume jewelry to complete the outfit. Another $150 I hadn't planned on spending, but necessary to look appropriate among what I imagined would be Allison's wealthy family and friends. The wedding gifts were my next consideration. I wanted to give them something meaningful, not just something from a registry. I spent weeks creating a handcrafted photo album chronicling Lucas's life from babyhood through college graduation. I included spaces at the end for wedding photos and future memories. The materials cost nearly $100, but the hours I put into it made it priceless. For their practical gift, I saved up and purchased the high-end stand mixer they'd registered for, $379 plus tax. It arrived in a massive box that I stored in my spare bedroom until departure. I also bought them a set of monogrammed towels that weren't on their registry, but matched the bathroom colors Allison had mentioned during one of our brief conversations. But the most important item I needed to prepare was the family veil. This delicate lace veil had been worn by my grandmother, my mother, me, and several cousins on their wedding days. It was slightly yellowed with age, but still beautiful. I took it to a specialty cleaner who assured me they could restore it without damaging the fragile fabric. "This is quite valuable," the cleaner told me, carefully examining the handmade lace. "You don't see craftsmanship like this anymore. The cleaning and restoration cost $300. Another expense I hadn't anticipated, but couldn't avoid. This veil was my family's legacy, and I wanted Allison to feel welcome into our traditions by wearing it. The hotel was another significant expense. The wedding invitation included a list of recommended hotels, the cheapest of which was $189 per night. I needed 3 nights, one before the wedding for the rehearsal dinner, the wedding night, and one additional night after, since there was no direct flight home the day after the wedding. That's $567 plus tax just for a place to sleep. Then there was the rental car. Seattle's public transportation wouldn't work for navigating between the airport hotel and wedding venues while carrying gifts and formal wear. The smallest economy car still cost $40 per day plus insurance. As the expenses mounted, my friends began questioning my decisions. "You're spending how much for this wedding?" Susan asked over coffee one morning. "Has Lucas even visited you once this year or offered to help with your ticket?" "He's very busy." I defended him. "His job is demanding and planning a wedding takes time." "Minnie," Susan said gently, "you're dipping into your retirement savings for a 3-day trip where you'll probably barely see Lucas." "He's my only son," I replied simply. That was reason enough for me. My other friend, Patricia, was even more direct. "Has this Allison girl even called to thank you for agreeing to bring the family veil? Does she appreciate what this means to you?" The truth was, Allison hadn't called. We'd exchanged a few text messages where I explained the veil's history, and she responded with, "Sounds nice, thanks." But I chose not to mention this to Patricia. "She's just busy with wedding details," I said instead. The week before departure, I scheduled a hair appointment, splurging on a cut and color to touch up my graying roots. I even got a manicure, something I normally did at home with a $2 bottle of polish. But I wanted to look my absolute best for Lucas. The night before my flight, I carefully packed everything. The dress and Lucas's father's tie, which I planned to give him to wear or keep in his pocket during the ceremony. A way to have Frank there in spirit. The photo album wrapped in tissue paper. The veil in its special acid-free box, which I planned to carry onto the plane rather than risk checking it. I barely slept that night, too excited about seeing my son after almost a year and too anxious about all the logistics. Would the veil be well received? Would Allison's family like me? Would Lucas be happy to see me? Or would he be too busy with last-minute wedding details? Morning came after a fitful night's sleep. As I closed my suitcase, I noticed my hands were shaking slightly. Not from age, but from nerves. This wedding represented so much more than just a ceremony. It was my son moving into the next chapter of his life, one where I worried there might be even less room for me. But I pushed those thoughts aside as I called a taxi to take me to the airport. This was Lucas's special day, and I was going to make sure everything I brought, from the gifts to the veil to my own presence, added to his happiness. The day of my departure arrived with a brilliant sunrise that I watched through my kitchen window at 4:30 a.m., much too early for anyone to be awake unless they had a 7:45 a.m. flight to catch. I'd barely slept, too anxious about missing my alarm. My taxi was scheduled for 5:00 a.m. to take me to the regional airport, where I'd catch the first of 2 flights that would eventually land me in Seattle. I did one final check of my luggage. Carry-on bag with essentials and the precious family veil in its acid-free box. One large checked suitcase with my clothes, shoes, and the photo album. And a second checked bag containing the boxed stand mixer and other gifts. Everything was ready. The taxi arrived precisely at 5:00 a.m., one of the benefits of living in a small town where traffic jams don't exist. The driver, an older gentleman named Joe, who I recognized from church, helped load my bags into the trunk. "Big trip?" he asked, eyeing my luggage. "My son is getting married," I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Well, congratulations to him," Joe said as he carefully placed my carry-on bag in the back seat next to me. "Seattle's a long way from Pennsylvania." During the 40-minute drive to the airport, I clutched my purse containing my ID boarding passes and the envelope with $800 cash I'd withdrawn for emergency expenses. My stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This was the farthest I'd traveled alone since Frank died. At the regional airport, I joined the short line at the check-in counter. When it was my turn, I explained to the agent that one of my bags contained wedding gifts, including delicate items. "Can you make sure it's handled carefully?" I asked. "And this carry-on has a family heirloom wedding veil that's over 100 years old." The agent nodded and placed fragile stickers on my checked luggage. She explained that I'd need to retrieve my bags in Chicago and recheck them for my connecting flight to Seattle. I felt a twinge of worry about entrusting my precious cargo to the airline system, but reminded myself that people flew with valuable items every day. Security was more stressful than I anticipated. I had to remove the veil from my carry-on for inspection, nervously watching as a TSA agent carefully opened the box. He seemed to understand its importance and was gentle, but I didn't fully relax until it was safely repacked and back in my possession. By the time I reached my gate, boarding had already begun. I hurried to join the line, worried I might miss the flight despite arriving at the airport 2 hours early as recommended. The small commuter plane was cramped, and I struggled to find space for my carry-on in the overhead compartment. A kind flight attendant eventually helped me secure it safely. The first leg of my journey passed without incident, though I couldn't help checking my watch, frequently concerned about having enough time to collect my luggage in Chicago and make my connection. O'Hare Airport was overwhelming. So many people rushing in every direction, announcements blaring over loudspeakers, moving walkways, and trains connecting distant terminals. I followed the signs to baggage claim, anxiously waiting for my 2 checked bags. The first appeared after about 15 minutes, the suitcase with my clothes. I pulled it off the carousel with difficulty, its weight straining my shoulder. Then I waited for the second bag with the wedding gifts. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The crowd around the carousel thinned as most passengers collected their belongings and departed. My connection to Seattle was scheduled to depart in 1 hour, and I still needed to recheck these bags and make my way to another terminal. Just as panic began to set in, my second bag appeared. Relief washed over me as I grabbed it and headed toward the check-in area for my next flight. The line was long, and by the time I reached an agent, I was breathless with anxiety. "My connecting flight to Seattle leaves in 35 minutes, I explained. The agent typed rapidly on her keyboard. "We'll get your bags on that flight, ma'am, but you need to hurry to gate C22. It's quite a distance." I practically ran through the terminal, my carry-on rolling behind me, navigating around slower travelers and dodging airport carts. By the time I reached the gate, my chest was burning, and I was perspiring despite the airport's air conditioning. The final boarding call had just been announced. The flight to Seattle was nearly 5 hours long, with turbulence that forced the flight attendants to remain seated for much of the journey. I couldn't eat the provided snack, my stomach too knotted with a mixture of excitement about seeing Lucas and lingering anxiety from the rushed connection. When we finally landed in Seattle, I felt exhausted, but relieved. The hard part was over, I thought. How wrong I was. I made my way to baggage claim, standing as close to the carousel as permitted. Passengers around me collected their luggage one by one. My suitcase with clothes appeared, and I pulled it aside. Then I waited for the bag with the wedding gifts. The crowd thinned. The carousel continued to turn, now mostly empty. After 20 minutes, only a handful of passengers remained, all of us waiting with increasing concern. An airline representative approached our small group. If you're still waiting for luggage, please come with me to the baggage service office. My heart sank. In the office, I explained about my missing bag and its important contents. I'm very sorry, ma'am, the agent said after typing information into her computer. It appears your bag was loaded onto a flight to Portland by mistake. Portland? I gasped. But those are wedding gifts for my son. The wedding is tomorrow evening. We'll have the bag on the next flight from Portland to Seattle, she assured me. But that won't arrive until tomorrow morning, and then it needs to be processed through our system. What time will I get it? I asked, my voice strained. The agent hesitated. The earliest would be around 3 p.m. tomorrow. The rehearsal dinner was at 6 p.m., cutting it close, but at least the gifts would arrive before the wedding itself. I provided the name and address of my hotel, and the agent promised the bag would be delivered there. Is there anything else in your bag that you need immediately? She asked. I thought about the stand mixer and other gifts. No, nothing essential. Just very important wedding gifts. As I left the baggage claim area, I felt a wave of disappointment but told myself it wasn't a disaster. The veil, the most important item, was safely in my carry-on. Everything would work out. I found the rental car counter and completed the necessary paperwork, then followed directions to the parking garage where my economy car waited. Seattle's unfamiliar streets and heavy traffic were intimidating after dark, and I had to pull over twice to check the GPS on my phone. By the time I reached my hotel, it was after 10 p.m. local time, though my body still felt like it was on Eastern time, 1 a.m. I was exhausted, hungry, and increasingly worried about the missing luggage. In my hotel room, I called Lucas. He should know about the delay with the gifts, I reasoned. The phone rang several times before he answered. Mom, is everything okay? It's late. I'm sorry to call at this hour, I said. I just wanted to let you know I arrived safely, but there was a problem with one of my bags. The airline sent it to Portland by mistake. What? How did they manage that? He sounded annoyed, but not particularly concerned. These things happen, I suppose. They're sending it tomorrow, but I wanted you to know the gifts might be cutting it close for the rehearsal dinner. There was a pause, then Lucas's voice, oddly cold. It's just stuff, Mom. Don't make this a big deal. His response stung. Did he not understand that these weren't just random items but carefully selected gifts with sentimental value? The veil is with me, I assured him quickly. That wasn't in the lost bag. Good, he replied, but without much enthusiasm. Listen, Mom Allison and I are in the middle of something. Can we talk tomorrow? I'll see you at the rehearsal dinner. The call ended before I could say much more. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, still holding my phone, feeling oddly hollow. After all the planning, the expense, the journey, that brief, distracted conversation was my welcome. I told myself he was just busy with last-minute wedding details. Tomorrow would be better. It had to be. My first morning in Seattle dawned gray and drizzly, matching my unsettled mood after the previous day's travel mishaps. I woke early, still on East Coast time, and immediately checked for messages about my missing luggage. Nothing yet. I called the airline's baggage service and was assured my bag was on its way from Portland and would be delivered to my hotel by mid-afternoon. With that tentative reassurance, I tried to focus on preparing for the rehearsal dinner. The blue dress I'd carefully selected was in my suitcase that had arrived safely, but the shoes and jewelry I'd planned to wear were in the missing bag. A shopping trip was now necessary, another unexpected expense. I was just about to leave the hotel when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Allison's mom, a contact I'd saved after Lucas had given me her number just in case. We had never actually spoken before. Hello, I answered, trying to sound cheerful. Minnie, this is Patricia Walker, Allison's mother. Her voice was crisp and professional. I'm just checking in to see if you arrived safely. Yes, thank you. I got in last night, though one of my bags was sent to Portland by mistake. The airline is delivering it today. Portland? She sounded more annoyed than sympathetic. How inconvenient. I hope it doesn't contain anything essential. Just some of the wedding gifts, I explained. But they should arrive in time. There was a pause before Patricia continued, her voice taking on a different tone. Lucas mentioned you were bringing a family veil. Allison has been quite excited about that tradition. Yes, I have it with me. It's been in our family for 4 generations. Wonderful. Allison's dress is designer. Vera Wang, actually, and we've been concerned about finding accessories that complement it properly. We're counting on that veil being appropriate. The comment stung, as if my family heirloom might not be good enough for Allison's expensive dress. Before I could respond, Patricia continued. The hairstylist needs time to work with it. Could you bring it to our home this afternoon? Say around 2? I hesitated, thinking about my missing luggage and needed shopping trip. I'm actually waiting for my bag to be delivered, and I need to buy shoes for tonight since mine were in the lost luggage. Oh, Patricia said, clearly disappointed. Well, I suppose you could bring it directly to the rehearsal dinner, but the stylist really would have preferred advance time with it. I'll do my best, I promised, though I wasn't sure exactly what that would entail. After ending the call, I sat on the edge of the bed feeling unexpectedly emotional. The veil had been carefully cleaned and preserved. It was beautiful in its vintage way, but Patricia's tone suggested it might not meet their standards. Would Allison even want to wear it? I shook off these thoughts and headed out to find replacement shoes and jewelry for the evening. The hotel concierge directed me to a nearby department store where I spent $95 on simple black heels and $40 on modest earrings. Neither what I had originally packed, nor what I would have chosen given more time and options. Back at the hotel by 2 p.m., I anxiously awaited my luggage. I called the airline again at 3 p.m. and was told the bag was out for delivery. By 4:30 p.m., with no delivery and the rehearsal dinner starting at 6 p.m., panic set in. One more call to the airline revealed that the driver was running behind schedule. Can you guarantee it will arrive before I need to leave for an event at 5:30? I asked. We can't make guarantees, ma'am, the representative replied. But it's definitely scheduled for delivery today. At 5:15 p.m., I made the difficult decision to leave for the rehearsal dinner without waiting any longer for the bag. I dressed in my blue outfit with the new shoes, applied makeup with a slightly shaky hand, and carefully placed the veil box in a tote bag. As I left my room, the hotel receptionist promised to notify me if my luggage arrived during the evening. The drive to the restaurant took longer than expected due to Friday evening traffic. By the time I found parking and hurried inside, it was already 6:10 p.m. The private dining room was filled with well-dressed guests mingling and holding champagne flutes. I scanned the crowd for Lucas but didn't immediately see him. A young woman with a tablet approached me. Name, please. Minnie Thompson. I'm Lucas's mother. She checked her list, then directed me to a table near the back of the room. Not at the family table, I noticed as I walked through the crowd. My assigned seat was with people I didn't know, far from where I could see Lucas standing with Allison and who I assumed were her parents. I placed my tote bag with the veil carefully under my chair and awkwardly introduced myself to the others at the table, distant relatives of Allison's and a couple who were neighbors of her parents. They were polite, but clearly already acquainted with each other, their conversation returning to shared connections after brief acknowledgments of my presence. From my isolated position, I observed Lucas and Allison. My son looked handsome in a suit I didn't recognize, new and expensive looking. Allison was stunning in a white cocktail dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. They were surrounded by people laughing and accepting congratulations. Lucas hadn't noticed my arrival. I considered going to him, but hesitated, not wanting to interrupt what appeared to be an important conversation with an older man in an impeccably tailored suit. As servers began bringing appetizers, I overheard a conversation from the table behind me. I can't believe how much Elizabeth spent on this rehearsal dinner, a woman was saying. The yacht club would have been perfectly fine, but she insisted on the exclusivity of this place. Well, that's Elizabeth, her companion replied. She's been planning Allison's wedding since the girl was in kindergarten. Everything has to be perfect. Elizabeth must be Patricia's formal name, I realized. And the rehearsal dinner was just one example of the Walker family's apparent wealth and expectations. As the evening progressed, I became increasingly aware of the divide between the two families, or rather between Allison's large affluent family and me, the sole representative of Lucas's side. I picked at my food, appetite diminished by discomfort, and the growing realization that I was merely a token presence at this celebration. Eventually, Lucas noticed me and came to my table. "Mom, you made it," he said, leaning down for a brief hug. "How was your flight?" "Fine," I said, not wanting to burden him with details of the stressful journey. "You look wonderful, Lucas. So happy." "I am," he said, glancing back toward Allison. "Have you met Patricia and Robert yet? Allison's parents?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Come on, I'll introduce you." He led me across the room to where Allison stood with a tall, distinguished-looking couple. "Mom, this is Allison, as you know, and her parents, Patricia and Robert Walker. This is my mother, Minnie." Patricia Walker was immaculately dressed, not a hair out of place, with the kind of polished appearance that comes from regular salon visits and expensive skincare. Robert Walker had silver hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to being in charge. "Minnie, so lovely to finally meet in person," Patricia said, air-kissing near my cheek. "We've heard so much about you." I doubted that was true given how little Lucas had been in contact, but I smiled and said, "Likewise. Thank you for this beautiful dinner." "Did you bring the veil?" Allison asked, cutting straight to the point. "Yes, it's at my table. I'll get it for you." "Actually," Patricia interjected, "maybe after dinner would be better. The lighting is better in the lounge area for looking at details." I nodded and was about to say something else when a waiter approached Robert with a question effectively ending our brief interaction. Lucas was quickly pulled away by other guests wanting to speak with him, leaving me standing awkwardly before I made my way back to my assigned table. As I sat down, I overheard Patricia's voice from nearby, clearly not realizing I could hear. Lucas's mother couldn't even manage to bring the veil she promised until the last minute. I don't have high expectations for this heirloom, to be honest. My face burned with embarrassment and hurt. The veil was beautiful, carefully preserved despite its age. But more than that, the dismissive tone in Patricia's voice made me feel small, insignificant, as if my family's traditions couldn't possibly measure up to their standards. Throughout dinner, Lucas circulated among the guests, but spent minimal time at my table. When the formal part of the evening concluded, and people began to mingle again, I retrieved the veil box from under my chair and approached Allison, who was chatting with a group of young women I assumed were her bridesmaids. "Allison, I have the family veil here if you'd like to see it," I said during a pause in their conversation. "Oh, right," she said, turning to her friends. Lucas's mom brought some old family veil for me to look at. The way she said old made it sound like a negative rather than the treasure it was. Nevertheless, I carefully opened the box and lifted out the delicate lace veil, gently unfolding it to display the intricate pattern. "It's been in our family for 4 generations," I explained. "My grandmother wore it in 1920, then my mother, then me. It's Belgian lace." Allison touched it with a single finger. "It's very vintage. I'm not sure if it will work with my dress. Mom..." Patricia joined us, examining the veil with a critical eye. "It's certainly antique. We'd need to see it with the dress, of course." Her tone suggested doubt. "I had it professionally cleaned and restored," I offered. "It's quite delicate, but in excellent condition." Before anyone could respond, a chiming sound rang out, and Patricia turned toward the front of the room where Robert was preparing to make a toast. The veil discussion was temporarily abandoned as everyone focused on the father of the bride. As Robert spoke eloquently about his daughter and future son-in-law, I carefully refolded the veil and returned it to its box. A hollow feeling was growing in my chest. The veil, like me, seemed out of place in this setting among these people. Just then, my phone vibrated with a text message. It was from the hotel. Your luggage has been delivered and is being held at the front desk. A wave of relief washed over me. At least the wedding gifts had arrived safely. I could retrieve them tonight and have everything ready for tomorrow. As the evening wound down, I approached Lucas one more time, hoping for a few moments of genuine conversation with my son. The luggage with your wedding gifts has finally arrived at my hotel, I told him. Would you like to come see them tonight, or shall I bring everything to the wedding tomorrow? Lucas glanced at his watch. Tonight's not good, Mom. We still have a lot to do, and frankly, I'm exhausted. Just bring them tomorrow, okay? Of course, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. Do you need any help with last-minute details? I'm happy to do whatever you need. No, the Walkers have everything under control. Their wedding planner is handling all the details. He glanced across the room where Allison was summoning him with a wave. I should go. Allison's parents want to discuss something about tomorrow's schedule. Lucas, I said quickly, touching his arm. I'm so happy for you. I know tomorrow will be wonderful. He gave me a distracted smile. Thanks, Mom. See you tomorrow. As he walked away, I felt strangely like I was watching a stranger, someone who resembled my son, but had somehow become a different person. I gathered my belongings and quietly left the restaurant unnoticed by the clusters of people still laughing and talking. In the privacy of my rental car, I finally allowed the tears I'd been holding back to fall. This wasn't how I'd imagined the beginning of my son's wedding weekend. Not at all. I woke early on the morning of Lucas's wedding day, my emotions a complex blend of excitement and lingering hurt from the previous evening. The first thing I did was check that my luggage had indeed arrived. There it was waiting at the front desk, as promised. I felt a surge of relief seeing the large box containing the stand mixer and the smaller packages with the photo album and other gifts. Back in my room, I carefully laid out my outfit for the wedding and began getting ready, allowing plenty of time to ensure I looked my best. The ceremony wasn't until 4 p.m., but I wanted to arrive early to deliver the gifts and offer any help that might be needed, even if Lucas had insisted none was required. At noon, I received a text from Lucas with the address of the Walker home, where both the ceremony and reception would take place. Ceremony in the garden, reception on the waterfront deck, the message explained, along with instructions about where to park. I replied immediately, should I come early with the gifts and veil? His response was delayed by nearly 30 minutes. Allison is getting ready with the bridal party at the house. You can bring the veil around, too. Just give it to the wedding planner at the door. The impersonal nature of this exchange bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I had traveled across the country at considerable expense to be part of my only child's wedding day. Yet it felt like I was being treated as just another guest, perhaps even a somewhat inconvenient one. Nevertheless, I pushed these feelings aside. Today wasn't about me. It was about Lucas and his new beginning with Allison. At 1:30 p.m., I loaded the wedding gifts into my rental car and carefully placed the veil box on the passenger seat. The Walker home wasn't difficult to find. It was one of the largest properties in an already exclusive neighborhood, with a circular driveway already lined with luxury vehicles and service vans. A young woman with a tablet greeted me at the door. Name, please? Minnie Thompson. I'm the mother of the groom. Oh yes, Mrs. Thompson. You're here for the veil delivery. Mother of the groom reduced to delivery person, I thought, but kept my smile in place. Yes, and I have wedding gifts as well. You can leave those on the gift table, which will be set up near the entrance to the reception area. As for the veil, let me take you to the bridal suite. Allison is expecting it. I followed her through the impressive home, noting the museum-quality art on the walls and the expansive views of Puget Sound from floor-to-ceiling windows. The house spoke of generations of wealth, so different from my modest home in Pennsylvania. The young woman knocked on a door upstairs. Allison Lucas's mother is here with the veil. Send her in, called a voice from inside. The bridal suite was actually a large bedroom transformed with racks of clothing makeup stations and floral arrangements. Allison sat at a vanity while a stylist worked on her hair. 4 young women in matching robes, presumably bridesmaids, lounged on couches, champagne flutes in hand. "Mrs. Thompson," Allison acknowledged without turning from the mirror. "You can put the veil on the bed." "Actually," I said, stepping forward with the box, "I thought I might show you how it's typically worn. There's a special way to secure it that's been part of our family tradition." Now Allison did turn, exchanging a glance with one of her bridesmaids that I couldn't quite interpret. "That won't be necessary. We've actually made other arrangements." "Other arrangements?" I repeated, confused. That's when I noticed it. A brand new veil displayed on a mannequin head near the window. Much longer than my family's veil, it sparkled with what appeared to be crystal embellishments. "Mom found this Swarovski crystal veil by the same designer as my dress." Allison explained, her tone suggesting I should be impressed. "We decided to go with Mom's veil since yours wasn't here for the stylist to work with yesterday." I stood frozen, the family heirloom box still in my hands. "But I brought it to the rehearsal dinner, and now I'm here 2 hours before the ceremony as requested." "Well, we had to make decisions," Allison said with a slight shrug. "The stylist needed to practice with whatever veil I was going to wear. Your timing was just too uncertain with that whole luggage situation." One of the bridesmaids snickered quickly, covering it with a cough. "I see," I said quietly, trying to process this rejection. All the effort to clean and preserve the veil to carry it safely across the country. For nothing. Allison turned back to the mirror. "You can just return yours to the little box for your next family wedding." The dismissal was clear. I carefully placed the box on a nearby table, acutely aware of the bridesmaids watching me, some with barely concealed amusement. "I'll see you at the ceremony then," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Allison murmured, already refocused on her reflection. I left the room with as much dignity as I could muster, but once in the hallway, I had to pause and take several deep breaths to compose myself. The casual dismissal of something so meaningful to me, a family tradition that connected generations, felt like a slap in the face. After retrieving the box with my family's veil, I made my way downstairs looking for Lucas. I needed to speak with him to help him understand why this mattered so much to me. I found him in what appeared to be a library surrounded by groomsmen in various stages of dressing. "Mom," he said, looking surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" I asked. He frowned, but followed me into the hallway. "What's wrong? We're kind of busy here." "Lucas, did you know that Allison decided not to wear the family veil, the one that's been passed down through generations?" He sighed heavily. "Yes, I knew. Her mother bought one that matches her dress perfectly. It makes sense, Mom." "But this is our family tradition. Your grandmother wore this veil and her mother before her. I wore it when I married your father." "It's just a piece of fabric," Lucas said, his voice taking on an edge I rarely heard directed at me. "Allison needs to be comfortable and happy on her wedding day. Why are you making this about yourself?" I stepped back, stung by his words. "I'm not making it about myself. I'm trying to share something meaningful from your family heritage." "My family is changing today," he said. "I'm starting a new chapter with Allison. Maybe it's time for new traditions." Before I could respond, Robert Walker appeared in the hallway. "Everything all right here, Lucas? We're on a tight schedule." "Fine, sir," Lucas replied quickly. "My mother was just leaving to take her seat." "Actually, the guests won't be seated for another hour," Robert corrected him. "But perhaps Mrs. Thompson would like to relax in the guest lounge while we finish preparations." His tone was polite but firm. Another dismissal. "Yes, thank you," I managed to say, clutching the veil box against my chest like a shield. As I turned to leave, I overheard Lucas say to Robert, "Sorry about that. My mother has always been emotional and difficult about these things." The words hit me like physical blows. Emotional and difficult. Was that how my son saw me? After everything we'd been through together, after all the sacrifices I'd made for him, I found my way to the designated guest lounge. A sunroom at the back of the house with a view of the garden where chairs were being set up for the ceremony. Staff members moved efficiently arranging flowers and adjusting a floral arch where my son would soon be married. I sat alone, still holding the rejected family veil, watching these preparations with a growing sense of detachment. Other guests wouldn't arrive for at least an hour. The family and wedding party were busy with their own preparations. I was utterly alone in a house full of people. For the first time, I allowed myself to confront the painful truth I didn't belong here. Not in this house, not in this celebration, perhaps not even in my son's new life. I had become an afterthought, a box to check. Invite groom's mother, rather than an integral part of this milestone. I looked down at the veil box in my lap, thinking of all the women in my family who had worn this delicate lace on their wedding days. The traditions and connections it represented, all dismissed as just a piece of fabric by my own son. The weight of this rejection coming after months of increasing distance and the painful interactions since my arrival suddenly felt unbearable. I couldn't sit in this room for another hour, then watch my son marry into a family that so clearly saw me as an inconvenience at best, an embarrassment at worst. With shaking hands, I opened my purse and took out the envelope containing my wedding card for Lucas and Allison. Inside was a heartfelt letter I'd written about my hopes for their marriage and a check representing a significant portion of my savings, money I'd put aside to one day help with the down payment on a house. I added a brief note. "Lucas, I love you more than words can say. I hope you find all the happiness you deserve. Mom." Then I did something I never imagined I would do. I gathered my belongings, including the family veil, and quietly slipped out a side door of the Walker mansion. No one noticed as I walked to my rental car. No one called after me as I placed the veil box carefully on the passenger seat. No one saw the tears streaming down my face as I drove away from my only son's wedding. The flight home was a blur. I'd called the airline from my hotel room and paid an exorbitant fee to change my ticket, desperate to leave Seattle as soon as possible. By some miracle, or perhaps due to my obvious distress, the airline representative had found me a seat on a red-eye flight that same night. I left the rental car at the airport, checked my luggage, including the unwanted stand mixer and other gifts that now seemed so pointless, and made my way to the gate in a fog of grief. The family photo album I'd created with such care remained in my carry-on, too precious to leave behind despite its rejection. During the darkened flight, while other passengers slept around me, I stared out the window at the endless black sky, replaying every moment of the disastrous trip. Had I done something wrong? Had I been too demanding, too emotional, too difficult, as Lucas had described me? Or had I simply become irrelevant in my son's new life, a relic of his past that no longer fit his future aspirations? By the time my connecting flight landed in Pennsylvania the following afternoon, exhaustion had dulled the sharpest edges of my pain, leaving a hollow ache in its place. The taxi ride home from the airport seemed to take forever, the driver's attempt at friendly conversation falling on my unresponsive ears. Home had never looked so empty as when I unlocked the front door and wheeled my luggage inside. The house was exactly as I'd left it, clean and orderly, with Lucas's high school graduation photo still prominently displayed on the mantel. I picked up the frame, studying the smiling face of the boy who had once been the center of my world. Where had that boy gone? When had he become the stranger who could dismiss me so casually? I unpacked mechanically, placing the family veil box on my dresser. Later, I would need to decide what to do with it. Perhaps there was a niece or cousin who might value its history, since it would never adorn my son's bride, as I had hoped. My phone had been off since I left the Walker mansion. Now, reluctantly, I powered it on, bracing for the flood of missed calls and angry messages that would surely come once Lucas discovered I'd left before his wedding. Nothing. No missed calls, no text messages, no voicemails. Somehow, this silence hurt more than any angry recriminations would have. Had no one even noticed I was gone? Or worse, had they noticed but not cared enough to reach out? That first night back home, I cried myself to sleep, something I hadn't done since Frank died. The grief felt similar in its intensity, a loss that cut to the very core of who I was. I had lost my husband to death, but I seemed to have lost my son to a life where I had no meaningful place. The first call came 3 days later. I was in the garden mindlessly pulling weeds as a way to occupy my hands and exhaust my body enough that sleep might come more easily. "Where the hell did you go?" Lucas's voice was cold with fury. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was to have people asking where my mother was during the ceremony? No, how are you? No concern for what might have driven me to such a painful decision. Just anger about the potential embarrassment I'd caused. "I left a note," I said quietly, sinking onto the garden bench. "A note? You couldn't even stay for my wedding, and all you left was a note." "I didn't feel welcome, Lucas." My voice broke slightly. "The veil, the way I was treated at the rehearsal dinner, the things I overheard." "Oh my God," he interrupted. "Are you seriously this selfish?" "This was my wedding day. Not everything is about you and your feelings." The accusation struck deep. Had I been selfish? Was I making this about me when it should have been about Lucas's happiness? "I'm sorry if I ruined anything," I said, fighting to keep my composure. "That wasn't my intention." "Well, you did," he snapped. "Allison's parents noticed, of course. They asked if you were always this unreliable." The unfairness of this characterization, after a lifetime of being anything but unreliable for my son, finally broke through my protective numbness. "Unreliable," I repeated, a new firmness in my voice. "Lucas, I have been there for you every single day of your life. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I flew across the country at considerable expense to attend your wedding. I brought a family heirloom that was casually dismissed." "It's just a stupid veil," he shouted. "It's not just about the veil," I said, surprised by my own calm in the face of his anger. "It's about respect. Respect for me, for our family history, for the relationship we've shared. I didn't feel any of that respect from you, from Allison, or from her family." "So you just left without saying goodbye, without watching me get married." "I didn't believe you really wanted me there." I admitted the painful truth finally spoken aloud. "Not as your mother, just as a box to check off on the guest list." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. "I can't talk to you when you're like this," Lucas finally said. "I thought you'd be happy for me, supportive of my choices. Instead, you made my wedding about your hurt feelings." "Lucas," I began, but the call had already ended. I sat in my garden for a long time afterward, surrounded by the perennials I'd planted years ago that continued to bloom season after season. Unlike my relationship with my son, these plants flourished with just basic care and attention. Where had I gone wrong with Lucas? Had I loved too much, not enough, in the wrong way? The days after that phone call were some of the darkest I'd experienced. I moved through life mechanically, grocery shopping, paying bills, watering plants, but the joy had drained from everyday activities. Friends called, and I made excuses not to see them, unable to face their inevitable questions about the wedding. After 2 weeks of this solitary grief, Susan appeared on my doorstep uninvited. "You're not answering my calls," she said, pushing past me into the house. "I'm worried about you." The simple expression of concern broke something loose inside me. Before I knew it, I was sobbing in my friend's arms, the whole painful story spilling out between gasps for breath. Susan listened without interruption, her arm around my shoulders. When I finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted, she spoke with the gentle directness that had characterized our friendship for decades. "Minnie, you did nothing wrong," she said firmly. "Nothing. You went above and beyond for a son who has clearly been pulled into his wife's orbit to the exclusion of his own family." "But I left before his wedding," I whispered. "What kind of mother does that?" "A human one," Susan replied. "A mother who had been pushed too far and needed to protect herself. Minnie, when was the last time Lucas really showed up for you? When did he last call, just to check how you're doing? Visit for no reason other than to spend time with you. Ask about your life instead of talking about his—" I couldn't answer. The truth was, Lucas hadn't done any of those things in years. "You've spent decades putting him first," Susan continued. "Maybe it's time to put yourself first for a change." Her words resonated in a way I hadn't expected. Had I spent so long defining myself as Lucas's mother that I'd forgotten how to be Minnie Thompson, a woman in her own right? That conversation marked the beginning of my healing process. With Susan's encouragement, I found a therapist specializing in family relationships and grief. Dr. Marshall helped me understand that my feelings were valid, that setting boundaries was healthy, and that Lucas's treatment of me reflected his issues, not my worth as a mother or person. "Relationships change as children grow up," Dr. Marshall explained during one session. "But healthy changes still involve mutual respect and consideration. What you're describing isn't a natural evolution, but a fundamental breakdown in basic courtesy." Over the weeks that followed, I began to reconnect with parts of myself I'd neglected. I joined a community garden project, sharing my knowledge of perennials with younger gardeners. I volunteered at the local library, reading to children during story hour. Small steps, but ones that reminded me I had value beyond my role as Lucas's mother. 3 months after the wedding, an email from Lucas appeared in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Checking in." The message inside was brief and careful. "Mom, I hope you're doing well. Things have been busy with work and settling into married life. I've been thinking about our last conversation and how things ended at the wedding. Maybe we should talk when things are less emotional. Lucas." No apology, I noted. No acknowledgement of how his words and actions had hurt me. Still, it was a first step, an outstretched hand, however tentative. My therapist helped me craft a response that was honest, but not accusatory. "Lucas, I would welcome the chance to talk when you're ready. I love you very much, and that will never change. But I also need to be treated with respect and consideration. Take the time you need and let me know when you'd like to have that conversation." Mom. Another month passed before Lucas called. The conversation was stilted at first, both of us careful not to trigger another explosive argument. But gradually, as we talked about neutral topics, his work, my garden, some of the old ease returned. "I've been doing some thinking," he said eventually, "about how things went before and during the wedding." I held my breath, waiting. "I wasn't very considerate of your feelings," he continued, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Allison and I were caught up in all the planning and her parents' expectations. I guess I just assumed you'd understand and go along with everything." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. A start. "I missed you," I said simply, "not just at the wedding, but for a long time before that." "I know," he replied softly. Things got complicated when I moved to Seattle, and then with Allison's family being so involved in everything. They're important to you, I acknowledged. But that doesn't mean I have to become unimportant. The silence that followed suggested he was truly hearing me for the first time in years. Would you be willing to visit? He asked eventually. Not right away, but maybe in a few months, you could stay in a hotel if that's more comfortable. The fact that he offered the hotel option, recognizing my need for space and independence, told me he was beginning to understand. I'd like that, I said. But yes, I think a hotel would be best for now. 6 months after the wedding, I flew back to Seattle. This time, the journey felt different. I wasn't traveling as a supplicant desperate for my son's attention and approval. I was visiting as Minnie Thompson, a woman with her own life and dignity open to reconnection but unwilling to accept disrespect. Lucas met me at the airport alone, a deliberate choice I suspected to give us time together before I saw Allison again. The conversation during the drive to my hotel was cautious but warming, like the first tentative spring day after a long winter. That evening, over dinner at a restaurant of my choosing, Lucas finally offered the apology I had needed. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, meeting my eyes across the table. I got so caught up in becoming part of Allison's world that I forgot about our world. Everything we've been through together, all you've done for me. When you left the wedding, I was angry at first, but then I started to understand why you felt you had to go. I reached across the table to take his hand. I'm sorry, too, for leaving the way I did. I should have tried harder to talk to you first, but I felt so erased, as if the first 28 years of your life, our life together, suddenly didn't matter anymore. They matter, he assured me. I lost perspective for a while, but they matter. The next day, I met with Lucas and Allison in their new apartment. The meeting was awkward initially, but to my surprise, Allison seemed different, less dismissive, more attentive. Later, Lucas confided that our estrangement had forced him to have difficult conversations with his wife about family priorities and respect. She didn't have the same kind of relationship with her parents that you and I had, he explained. In her family, appearances matter more than feelings. She's learning that there's another way to be. That visit marked the beginning of a new chapter in my relationship with Lucas. Not a return to what we had before, but the creation of something different. Something that acknowledged we had both changed, but still valued our connection. The family veil remains in its box in my bedroom. Perhaps one day, if Lucas and Allison have a daughter, she might choose to wear it for her wedding. Or perhaps not. I've learned that I can honor family traditions without forcing them on the next generation. More importantly, I've learned that self-respect isn't selfish. Standing up for how I deserve to be treated isn't making things all about me. It's establishing healthy boundaries that ultimately benefit everyone involved. 1 year after the wedding that I didn't attend, Lucas and Allison visited me in Pennsylvania. They stayed in a hotel, but spent days helping me plant a new section of garden and evenings looking through old photo albums, including the one I had so carefully created for their wedding. I wish I had opened this sooner, Lucas said quietly as he turned the pages, seeing his life story laid out with such love. I didn't understand what I was rejecting. You understand now, I replied. That's what matters. Life isn't perfect. Lucas and I still have moments of tension, and my relationship with Allison remains a work in progress. But there's mutual respect now and acknowledgement that family connections require nurturing from all sides. The veil will wait in its box, a testament to generations past and possibilities future. And I will continue to grow not just as Lucas's mother, but as Minnie Thompson, gardener volunteer friend, and a woman who finally learned that loving herself is as important as loving her child. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation, even when it was heartbreaking to do so? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people we love the most. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and healing. Remember, it's never too late to start building healthier relationships with others and with yourself. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of your heart first.